Hello, how's everyone doing out there? If you can, if anyone's listening, can you give us some feedback on the mic? Let us know if you can hear us okay. Translogic, how you doing, buddy? I think it's the first time I've seen you here. Welcome aboard. Okay, so we're just getting set up. Had a few technical difficulties trying to get going. Betters, how you doing, buddy? Thank you. Mike, loud and clear, thank you. We hear you but can't see your face. Lucky you. That's to your benefit. Silver up, there you go. Okay, here we are. How's everyone doing today? Welcome to Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira. And I'm with a special guest, Jason Nutter, who we will get to know shortly. But first things first, a little bit of housekeeping. Again, if you are new to this channel or you have not already done so, please do subscribe. Click on the bell to be notified on new updates, and do give us a thumbs up if you like what we do. And don't forget, you can also find us on social media. www.silverbullion.com.sg is our website. .sg because once again we are in Singapore. Silver Bullion SG Twitter, Silver Bullion PL for private limited. The audio versions can be found on Bitly, SBTV iTunes, and SBTV Spotify. And do join our SB Crisis Tracker group on Telegram, where we do go ahead and we post current news events that do affect gold and silver prices. So as you can see, I do have with me here today another partner, Jason Nutter. So Nutter, sorry. Welcome aboard, Jason.
Thanks, Patrick.
Okay. So, Jason, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the people out there?
Yeah, sure. I would be what you guys would call a silver bug, I guess. The first time I met Vincent, our colleague, I told him I might be the biggest silver bug in Singapore. So yeah, I'm actually in the solar industry. I work in sales, I run sales for a German company, and most of our sales actually takes place in China. So I travel a lot to China. I'm there maybe once a month, and I've been doing that last 3-4 years.
Okay. How's the solar industry in China, and overall as a whole, what's the environment like in China for business?
Yeah, so the first time I arrived in China, I was really taken aback in a good way by the scale of the country, right? It's a massive country. Everyone's very, very hardworking. Everyone's trying to, work hard to get a better life for themselves, for their kids. And it doesn't matter, you get onto a plane in Shanghai, you can drive 8 hours inland, you can fly 3 hours, and you land, and it's the same story. Everyone's speaking the same language, everyone's working hard. Yeah, so solar in my industry, the last few years, it's just been going up, like exponentially, right? China's very big on leapfrogging, so they know, okay, the old way of doing things, there are certain drawbacks, Solar's clean, solar's good. Yeah, and if you travel further into the more remote areas, seeing massive solar farms is
Wow.
it's normal, right? You drive on a highway and all you see on both sides are just solar farms.
Okay, that's wow. Okay, just want to say hello to some of the guys here. Again, Betters News Junkie. Again, hello. Pink Mangoes, hello. Thank you. Bill, hello from Missouri. I guess you're gearing up for some college football with the Tigers. Hello from Idaho. How you doing, Truth Teller? PM Ruckus, aloha. RG, I always get yours mixed up. RGJGJ. Is that Jason dude from Vienna? Uh, Actually, Jason, he did have a role to play in this year's In Gold We Trust report. He had an interview with Jim Rogers, which is why we have him here to tell us about that interview, what his take is on Jim and the things he had to say, and of course to let us know about his silver bug tendencies. So we're gonna start with that. In fact, when did you start getting into silver?
Yeah, okay. So I did my university degree in Melbourne, in Australia, right? And then I had the opportunity to go to Sweden for a year on exchange. So I grabbed that opportunity. I was studying environmental engineering, so nothing really in the financial sphere at all. And then I'm in Sweden. I'm taking my Aussie dollars, my savings were in Australian dollars. I was taking that, every 2 months, transferring money into Swedish crowns. And then just one weekend, I thought to myself, maybe I should just transfer all my Aussie dollars into Swedish crowns just so that I don't have to do this every month, 2 months.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be like one of the best trades ever, because then the financial crisis hit and then the Aussie dollar tanked. And I was thinking to myself, wow, if I didn't do that, just by dumb luck, I probably would have to cut my exchange period short and fly back to Australia, right? Yeah. And a very good friend of mine was living with us, and she was from Iceland, or she is from Iceland, and the Icelandic krona dropped even more drastically, and she actually had to go home. So I saw how these currency fluctuations actually had a real impact on just normal students, right? We were just working hard, earning our $8 an hour, saving that money, and then something happens and you lose half the value. And I guess that got me down this rabbit hole of, okay, what is money? Yeah. What's this paper stuff that I'm trading my time for? And then got into following Ron Paul, Peter Schiff, learning about Austrian economics, learning about gold. And after I started learning about gold, started learning about silver. And yeah, that's where the whole journey began, I guess, 10, 11 years ago now.
Okay, and can you, I'm curious about the work ethic in China. You mentioned that everybody works the same way. How would you describe that for people that have never seen it before?
Okay, so probably the closest economy you could think of would be the American one, right? Because you've got a large population speaking the same language and being very culturally coherent or homogeneous, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't really have that in Europe, right? So you might have it in Japan, Korea, but they're a lot smaller than China and the States, right? So if you imagine a population that's 3, 4 times, 5 times bigger than the US or Europe on a whole, and imagine all of them speaking exactly the same language with very similar, a homogeneous culture, working hard to make their life better, right? So they're hungry and they're hardworking. And because they've all come from, just 40 years ago, 30 years ago, everyone in China, nearly everyone was living in real poverty, right?
Right.
And they see how working hard brings you fruits, right? If you get to keep your fruits, the fruits of your labor. You look at Shanghai now. When I land in Shanghai, I get on a maglev train, and it takes me to 450 kilometers per hour, and within 9 minutes I'm in Shanghai, jump in a taxi, go over crazy highway systems to get to my hotel. Very modern city. I think people that have not been to China probably see it as or could see it as a backward country, or might see it as a backward country. But I think once you get there, you see the technology that they employ. I can't even use cash there. When I'm buying a piece of bread, like cooked, like they call it baos, right? Baos, steamed bread on the side of the road for breakfast. The guy doesn't accept cash. I have to scan a QR code that he has hanging on his store to pay him, right? So the technology that they're employing in their everyday lives are so far ahead of what I experience anywhere else, whether that be Germany, Australia, Singapore.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is it like a mobile communicating app like WeChat? Or
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So imagine going everywhere, having using Facebook to pay for everything. I guess that's what Libra is trying to do, right?
Right.
So you've got your messaging, you call your friends, you pay, you share news articles, everything through one app. Yeah.
Okay.
Even YouTube's on the same app. Their version of YouTube,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's interesting. I think you're bringing a pretty good perspective for a lot of people who've never been to China. Let's take a look at some of the live chat, the questions that are going on. Frank, good morning. How are you doing?
Ron Paul is the man.
Bill, where's that?
It says here Ron Paul is the man,
Well,
so that's
yeah.
good to hear.
Yeah, Ron Paul, he's the man. I think he got a lot of us, if not started on gold and silver, he at least started us to understand about money. Ron Paul, he does know what's going on. Let's see, betters, be good to hear from Jason about the fundamental demand for silver from the solar industry and where he sees it going in the future. Okay, how would you respond to Better's question?
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, every single solar panel uses up about a quarter of an ounce of silver. Okay, but I'm sure our viewers have seen how a solar panel looks like. If you look at a solar panel, each solar panel has about 60 to 75 solar cells that are about this big, right? And if you look, you see these silver streaks on them, and this is how the solar cell transmits electricity, right, through these streaks on the cells. And if you think about it, every single solar panel has a quarter of an ounce, so that's like a quarter of a American silver eagle,
Yeah.
right? Or if you're thinking about junk silver, it'd probably be like maybe $0.50 or an American quarter, right? That much silver is embedded in each solar panel. And these panels are designed to last 30 years. So once that silver goes into that panel, it's almost as if that silver is now in cold storage, right? Nobody's going to be taking that silver away from that solar panel. And at current prices, it actually doesn't make sense to try and recycle silver from that panel, right? Because you can imagine you have to break the solar cell down. There's a lot of different chemicals in there to get your pure silver back out into a usable form. It's going to take a lot of work. So every single solar panel that you see now installed, that has silver in it that will not be moving unless the silver price really starts to move. And then somebody was asking how's the demand like, right? So the solar industry is increasing every year exponentially. So that means, the increase from the year before is always more, right? So we've just to put in a perspective, like when I joined the company 4 years ago and versus now, our revenues have gone up by about 10 to 15x in just the last two to 3 years. So that tells you how much solar is coming onto the market, right? And every single solar cell that comes off the production line has silver in it. And they're melting down like Heraeus kilobars to make this silver paste, right? Yeah, so I would say I was a silver bug, I got into the solar industry, and now I'm a bigger silver bug.
Okay, so I guess these solar panels, they're, like you said, silver in cold storage in the hot sun, I guess, huh? Okay, take a look at a few more of the questions. From what you see, PM Ruckus is asking, is solar ever going to be a serious energy choice?
I would say it will be one of the answers of the future. It's not gonna, if you hear people saying, solar's that's all we're ever gonna need, I disagree with that, because the sun only shines a certain part of the day, right?
Yeah.
And so once you need to start storing that energy, that electricity, things get expensive. So, if you need to start installing lithium battery packs, then you need to start sizing them properly, and you can imagine, so, the weather's not the same every single day in most parts of the world. So some days you'll get very good sunlight, some days you'll get cloudy skies, and then your output from your panels will be halved, right? So then when you go and try and think of that variability in weather, and then think about how much batteries I need to store so that I can have, run my TV, my air conditioning, my fridge. So then I think in that aspect, solar will not be the only answer. Yeah. It would be it would augment current power systems well, especially in areas with a lot of land. So, for example, Australia is a good place. Yeah. The west of China is a good place because there's a lot of land that's not arable. So putting panels on there actually it's very low cost.
Okay. Yeah. And as one of our viewers is saying, California by 2020, I think all new homes are going to have to include solar. So solar's there. It's going to be a big part of the energy to come. But let's talk about that interview you had with Jim Rogers.
Yep.
Excuse me, with Jim Rogers. This was from In Gold We Trust report this year, 2019. And let me go ahead and get to the page number for Jason.
It's page 90.
Yep, 94. Okay, so here we have Jason with Jim Rogers, and he had an exclusive interview. He actually went over to Jim Rogers' house, and we had an interview with Jim Rogers last year. Jim didn't invite me to his house, but he invited Jason to his house. So that's a pretty special thing, pretty special experience. I suppose it was for you.
Yeah, it sure was.
Yeah, tell us a little about it.
So Jim is a hero of mine, right? Like learning about what he did, getting on a motorbike and going across the world, exploring, having adventures, quitting his job after, doing really well, making some bets, investing. Yeah, so in many ways he is one of my superheroes, right? To live a life like he has. So when I got the chance to interview him, I jumped at it. And Jim was very generous with his time. He invited me into his nice home in Singapore, and then basically we just sat down in in his living room. You see
Yeah.
that picture over there.
Yeah.
He's got, I don't know, I lost count. I think he's got 5 different globes in just in that room, right? So yeah, he definitely sees the world as a whole, and yeah, Jim shared with me a few his thoughts on gold and where he thought the economy was going to go in the near future.
Okay. We'll get into exactly those things. First thing, the title of your article. Whenever you see problems, remember Weiji.
Weiji, yeah.
Okay, Weiji.
So yeah, so Weiji, look, I have it on my phone here. It's actually the Chinese word for crisis, right? But if you know a little bit about Mandarin or Chinese, you know that sometimes their words are made up of individual characters, right? So this word for crisis, 危机, if you look at it, on the left, the word 危 can mean danger or does mean danger, and the word on the right means or can mean opportunity, right? So Jim, he was telling me, the Chinese, they've got a long history, and they understand crisis probably better than we do in our with our younger languages, younger cultures. So he said, yeah, remember, 危机, in crisis, there's always danger and opportunity, right?
Right. And okay, going through your article, which was outstanding, you did a really terrific job, and I do hope people download the 2019 in Gold We Trust report.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's a great job, Jason. A question you asked Jim, hang on, airplane. A question you asked Jim was, you mentioned in your fantastic book, Street Smarts, that the 1970s was the decade for commodities, 80s for Japan, 90s for internet stocks, and then you asked him, what will the 2020s be all about? And he gave you an answer, survival, mainly about survival.
Yeah.
Can you speak on that a bit?
Yeah, so it's pretty scary, right, when you hear that. So he looks me straight in the eye and he says, yeah, Jason, it's going to be about survival. So he says that, we've been through a period of, I guess, a lot of expansion, a lot of taking on of new debt. He thinks, and I think a lot of us agree, he thinks, the current way of doing things is not very sustainable, and that debt will either have to be repaid or reneged on at some point.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you're going to get dislocations. So for him, he's saying it's going to be about survival. It's going to be about, transitioning to that next system, to whatever happens next, right? To batten down the hatches and get through the storm. That was kind of, in a nutshell, his view on where we're going to go and what, the average guy will need to do.
Yeah, okay. So when he said that word survival and you went home and you thought about it, what were some of the things that if you had to create a list of priorities of things to do, what was coming through your mind coming from Jim Rogers, his outlook?
I just went and started stacking baked beans. No, I'm kidding. I guess the main thing, I asked him later on in the interview, so what would you say when people were, if the average person needs to transition, to get to that next stage, right, to get through this tough period, what do they need to do? And I also asked about, how my parents, for example, and many of my friends' parents or my relatives, they've been working hard, saving their money diligently, consuming less than they've earned. They're putting their money in the bank and they're seeing inflation eat that purchasing power, right? So that's why I asked Jim, so, can you give them any advice? And he said, yeah, everybody is searching for yield now, and the dangerous thing is that sometimes yield is dangerous in these situations, right? You might get your 5-6% a year, but then you don't get your capital back. So it's not only a return on investment. It's getting a return of your investment. So yeah, the first thing I thought of when I left was, oh, I'm glad I have a substantial amount of my savings in precious metals, right?
Yeah.
Because they usually do pretty well in these debt deflations or these large hyperinflations, right?
Yeah, and you went on to ask Jim. You mentioned to him that you do plenty of work in and around China, and
Yeah.
you're in awe of the place, as
Yeah.
you mentioned a bit earlier, scale, the culture, and mindset of the people, and you ask people to visit whenever China comes up in conversation. And you asked Jim, what would you say to people about China today and where it's heading? And Jim responded, "You should have gone to China 50 years ago." What did he mean by that? Why did he say that?
I guess he was trying to put the point across that 50 years ago was a better time to start moving to China, getting involved in China than it is now, even though now is still a good time. I guess 40 years ago in 1978, is that right? 41 years ago, that was when Deng Xiaoping started to change things in China. That's when they started to be more open to internationalizing China's economy. So he went on to elaborate that, China seems to be, for some reason, they're the culture that keeps coming to the fore, right? Like other cultures, they come up and then they fade, and then another culture takes over. But somehow with China, whether you're talking about economic prowess or, in the sphere of science and technology, they're always at the top or near the top, right? And so he thinks that this is going to happen again. He's pretty sure of it, and so let's see. The visits that I've been making to China kind of definitely proves his point.
Yeah, he that is true. I mean, we all know the stories of the empires in China. They rise and they fall. They rise and they fall. The thing is, they do come back, and the Roman Empire fell. You don't really see it. I mean, Western empires, it seems when they fall, they don't really come back compared to the way China does. China will have its ups and downs. Then I see this comment here where throughout history, when governments have collapsed or currency, money has collapsed, people have always turned to gold and silver. Why? Jim is very strong in gold and silver.
So Jim, if you look back on his interviews, right, he's got people have the impression that he's not very pro gold and silver because he always says he's not buying at these levels, right? He thinks that he will buy when gold has a next deep downturn. But what people don't know when they listen to his interviews is that he's already got a very large core position. Yeah. So he's bought a lot of gold and silver way back when they were priced in a different postcode, right? So he says he's not going to sell and he's not going to add to his holdings at these prices. But yeah, if gold and silver go down, then, he will, he always likes to say, then he hopes he's smart enough to add more. So he thinks everyone should own something. So if you don't have any gold and silver exposure now, you should get some. It doesn't matter what the current price is. Get a little bit because gold and silver is probably the only physical gold and silver that you hold, right? Or that you have stored in a trusted location. They're the only hedges, I guess, you can have that are at the same time a financial asset while not being somebody else's liability. You can't really find many other investments that have those aspects to them. So they serve very well whenever you go through a tumultuous period.
Yeah. And I know you talk to him about gold, and he always talks about gold. But you also brought up silver.
Yes.
with Jim. And so what do you have to say on silver?
Yeah, so what we talked about earlier with silver being used in solar panels, right? That's like the commodity aspect of silver. That's not the monetary aspect that silver holds, right? He says that whenever gold goes up, silver follows, and silver follows in a like as if it's on steroids,
Yeah.
right? And the reason for that is because he sees that when people really start using gold as money again, silver will then actually fulfill its role as money, in even a better way than gold does, just because silver's not worth as much. So even at the peaks of precious metals moves, silver's still at around 15 to 20 to 1 ratio, right, price wise to gold. So if he made an example saying, okay, if you were to go down the street and you wanted to buy some bread, if you had a gold coin, you're not gonna you either need to buy a whole room full of bread.
Yes. Yeah.
Or you're not going to get any change back, right?
Right.
So in that circumstance, having a small silver coin would serve the purpose as money. That small silver coin would serve it better. Yeah, and so that's why he says, when people start moving into gold, silver will then play catch up and get even relatively speaking even bigger moves.
Yeah, we we do hear a lot of people who that they feel the same sentiment, and I have to say I'm one of them as well, just as you are.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, he made this statement also where he would suggest that people look back at history and realize that maybe it is time for a long period of a lack of exuberance. What was your take on that when he said it?
Yeah, the thing with the Jim is he did history at Yale, right? So he doesn't just say what he thinks. He brings out he brings a historical perspective into his thoughts, into his opinions. So it's very hard to argue against history, right? So when he says that, like if you scroll up there, he says, as a historical example, the financial community was not a great place to be between 1929 and 1979. So, he said, that's 50 years, right? That it wasn't good to be a banker. It wasn't good to be a stockbroker. It would be better in those years if you were a farmer or drilling for oil or something like that, right? So when he says that, you look back at history and now we're kind of overextended, right? Yeah, now it's a time where probably we're going to go into a period where people are not looking to leverage and take on heaps of debt to make it rich make it big overnight. So, I can't argue with that line of thinking.
Yeah. So you you mentioned the word farmers, and Jim went on to say in your interview with him that he's optimistic about agriculture because it's so depressed,
Right.
and he even says it's a nightmare.
Right.
Okay. And can you enlighten us a bit on why he went and said that? I know he often says that the average age of the farmer is like 50 plus, and nobody else is really coming into farming, so he has a worry about it.
Yeah. So for maybe not so much in countries like Singapore, but in countries like, Australia, Canada, Japan, America, it doesn't matter, right, where you travel, as long as you travel to an agricultural country and you ask them about, or you speak to farmers, farmers there are usually depressed and old, right? They're telling their kids, don't do what I did, do something else, right? And a large reason as to why Trump got elected, I think, is because the farming community that used to be so important to all these different countries, they used to be the bread basket, right? People in the cities could eat because of the hard work that these guys were doing. These guys are now reaching retirement, telling telling their kids, hey, don't come close to a farm, please. You know, don't get into this horrible business. And Jim often says, you know, when people can't wait to give something away, that's when you should be buying it. I guess that's when you know you're at the bottom of a cycle.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And I think you asked him a pretty good question here. Where any words of advice to friends or family that are in or entering retirement today with such a low interest rate environment currently being the norm? And he said, be extremely careful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was your take on that when he said be extremely careful?
Yeah, so I touched on it a bit earlier, right? So he said, yeah, be careful. You want to get your money back. It's not just about making money off your money. You just want to get your money back. And maybe, you know, eating a little bit of the inflation might be the safest thing you can do now while you go through this period in time. But he was very, he didn't want to just paint with a broad brush to say, oh, this is what someone should do. So he said everyone should know what their situation is, and then, you know, do the best they can, knowing that the coming period will be pretty volatile. Yeah. So he mentioned that he's buying Russian bonds, right?
Right.
But that's not something that a normal mom and pop on the street should be doing if they're not, if they don't know what Gazprom is doing or what Rosneft is doing, right?
Right.
So he kept reiterating that, yeah, do what you need to do, but just make sure you know what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, Jim is he's definitely pretty high on China, and towards the end of your interview with him, he said if he were 35 today, he would definitely move to China.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm almost 35. But yeah, he's still very pro moving to Asia. He thinks Asia is going to be the continent where, you know, things start moving even faster, and, you know, where it's going to be the place to be in the next decades. So yeah, that was his thoughts on things.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the chat that's been going on. Waves. Thank goodness we have large farming communities in North America. Yeah, agriculture, it doesn't get the glitter, it doesn't get the glitz, but you can't live without it. It's something that we have to keep alive. Elbo Sanchez, how you doing? Jason, he's asking if you've ever seen a farm in the U.S.?
No, to be honest, no, I have not. I've only seen farms in Australia, Canada, India.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so no, I have not. But maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Okay, so that's your introduction to Jason. He's pretty well traveled. He's seen both East and West. Lived in Europe for a while. Lived in Australia for a while. Goes back and forth into China, and then does see how things are developing and growing in China. So he does have a pretty good outlook on that. So okay, let's get into some news.
Sure.
All right. So let's take a look at
Tell
silver.
me what's happening, Patrick.
Yeah, hopefully I can do that. But let's take a look at silver and gold. That's always on our mind.
Yeah.
So let's see. Page is loading up a bit. So yeah, again, if you didn't know, we do accept Hong Kong dollars, and I think we're going to be accepting Australian dollars. It's in the works as well. 75% off transfer-in charges, meaning if you have silver and gold somewhere else and you want to store it with us, we're giving you 75% off on the transfer-in fees. Transfer-in fees, it's basically it has to do with things like the testing and things like that, because anything that comes in the vault, we need to make sure that it is pure and it is what it's stated to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, US dollar, let's take a look. Silver, 1771 an ounce?
Whoa. I chose a good day to come, huh?
Yeah, you did. You got to come by more often. Gold 1545. So just by that alone, I'm going to assume the ratio is getting a bit tighter now, closing down. Yeah, we're at 87.2. Okay, so silver is hanging in there. Gold is still hanging in there. And gotta tell you, I think right now Asia is reacting to President Trump's tweets. I think, as you guys know, he had a pretty good tweet hurricane going on was what we had. I think all the feathers flew off the Twitter bird after all his tweets. But so I think what we're seeing right now is when President Trump made those comments, markets in Asia were closed. Now they're open and they're reacting to what he had said. One of the first tweets in his storm. As usual, the Fed did nothing. It's incredible that they can speak without knowing or asking what I'm doing, which will be announced shortly. We have a very strong dollar and a very weak Fed. I will work brilliantly with both, and the US will do great. My only question is, who is our bigger enemy, Jay Powell or Chairman Xi? Jason, what's that all about?
I wouldn't pretend to know, but it's definitely pretty shocking, right? I mean, if you think about it, he's attacking two things at once. He's attacking the dollar and at the same time the Federal Reserve. Right?
After he just said he will work brilliantly with both.
Exactly. So if you think about that, just think about it for a while, right? Our whole financial systems it's based on those things, right? It's based on the dollar and it's based on the Federal Reserve, right? And now in his next tweet saying that public enemy number one is Jay Powell, that's goosebump territory type of tweet, right? He's basically pulling. It's a paradigm shift, I think, and the public he's being very public about that. So as crazy as people say Donald Trump is, I don't think he does things unplanned. Like though his methods are probably unorthodox, but there's a method to his madness, right? And for him to come out and say this, he must have something up his sleeve. So I'm not sure what that is, but I think we'll see soon enough.
Yeah, he's got to have something up his sleeve. I know there was I think there was some type of a deal with Japan where Japan's going to be buying a lot of agriculture, especially corn now from the U.S. But still, I think you have to give a man room to do his job. Mm-hmm. And Jay Powell has got to be feeling boxed up right now. It's got to be tough for him.
Yeah, whatever he does now, right? It's either he keeps going down this path and keeps becoming a bigger enemy, or he becomes a puppet for Trump, right? So he's kind of stuck.
Yeah. Okay, and let me see. He went on to say, our country has lost stupidly trillions of dollars with China over many years. That's true. I think all of us will agree. They have stolen our intellectual property at a rate of hundreds of billions of dollars a year, and they want to continue. I won't let that happen. We don't need China, and frankly would be far better off without them. The vast amounts of money made and stolen by China and must stop. Our great American companies are hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China. I'll stop there. Let me back up a bit. The first part, we don't need China. You've been in China. I don't know what to make of that one, honestly, because I mean I'm all for a president needs to take care of his country first. That's why he's
elected, right?
Exactly. So I'm all for that. But the thing is, if let's say U.S. were to just completely U-turn from China right now, I don't think the manufacturing sector is there yet. The industrial section is there yet to go ahead and start making shirts again or things like that. much less the wages.
Yeah.
It just would not be there. So I think what would end up happening is if they did take it out from China, what are they looking at? Brazil, Mexico, or somewhere else to go ahead and make it? But to say we don't need China, what I learned is when people don't talk, that's when bad things start to happen. And this is a step toward bad things happening if when he says we don't need China. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, so somebody made a quote a while ago. I can't remember who this guy is, but definitely smarter guy than I am. And he said, when goods don't flow across borders, then soldiers will.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, you know, Trump might be right that, you know, you guys in America don't need China in a way that you don't need China for survival, right? Because America's pretty self-sufficient. You guys have a big enough population. You can have your own market. You've got enough food. You've got enough energy, enough water. You don't need China per se. But if you imagine a world where America doesn't trade with 1.4 or 5 billion people, you know, it's a different world than we live in today. So yeah, I think things will be looking pretty different in that world, right, where America and China aren't working together in a way, right?
Yeah, because that's definitely gonna polarize countries without a doubt. You know, they're either gonna side on the side with China, side on the side of the U.S., and I think that it can be a very, very big problematic situation. But Trump went on to say, you know, better off without them. Vast amounts of money made and stolen from China year after year. Our great American companies are hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China. Ordered, pretty strong word.
Yeah, let's see how he backs this tweet up, right? But yeah, I really don't know what to make of this tweet. Just too far away from my.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange to hear when a president is going to order the private sector to do something. So I think that caught a lot of people off guard. But as Shane Clements mentioned, he actually can do that. We'll get into that in a while, but we'll go through his tweets.
Yeah.
Hang on, let me go back. Including bringing your companies home and making your products in the USA. I will be responding to China's tariffs this afternoon. This is a great opportunity for the US. Also, I'm ordering all carriers, including FedEx, Amazon, UPS, and the Post Office, to search for and refuse all deliveries of fentanyl from China. Fentanyl kills 100,000 Americans each year. President Xi said he would stop it, but he didn't. And our economy, because of our gains in the last 2.5 years, is much larger than that of China. We'll keep it that way. So going back, he is looking at ordering companies back home and having things made in the US, and he's saying it's a great opportunity, and he's asking carriers, FedEx, UPS, Post Office, start looking for fentanyl. Do you think the U.S. is moving kind of into a dangerous place right now with his the way he's looking at things right now, or do you think it may actually be in the best interest of the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, if you take a step back, right, and you think about it, Trump's position on the whole trade saga, right, has been, we're supporters of free trade. We're free, you know, we speak for the world in saying that we need to have a level playing field. We're for free trade. We're for freedom. The Chinese Communist Party isn't, and therefore everybody rally behind me. I'm fighting for the greater good, right? International free trade. What he's doing now, he's actually becoming more China-like, right? If he starts telling private companies what they have to do, where they can put their companies, who they're allowed to trade with, the next step will be who these companies are allowed to hire. Can you hire a Chinese national when you're at IBM, because maybe the Chinese national is going to steal our IP, right? So he's becoming more dictatorial, right? So he's becoming the thing that he's trying to fight against. So that's I don't know. I think he might be boxing himself or painting himself into a corner there, right? You'll end up with two communist parties in a way, right? If he keeps going down this track. And with regards to fentanyl, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. I'll go. Your way sounds better.
I was watching a documentary on my flight to China called Empires of Silver. So maybe our viewers would like to check that out, right?
Yeah.
And it talks about how the Qing dynasty, the last dynasty in China in the 1700s, 1800s, they used silver as money.
Right.
And nobody in the West could sell anything to China, so there was a massive trade deficit that the Western powers had with China. So they were buying tea from China, they were buying silk from China, they were buying I think tea and silk and porcelain, right? China was the greatest exports that China had. So it was insatiable demand from Europe. And the only thing that China accepted in exchange for these goods was silver, right? And so the whole world, besides China, started to face a silver shortage because silver had to keep, was flowing into China.
Yeah.
And so what happened was the West then thought up of a brilliant scheme, and they said, what if we can just get these Chinese addicted to opium? So we'll find a way to get opium into China, and then the Chinese won't know how to grow and process opium, right? And then they'll get addicted, and then we can balance the balanced trade, right?
Yeah.
And it's just funny, right? How things work, because now here we are 200 odd years later, and it's the same, in a way, the same thing's happening. Like China's exporting everything to the world. Everybody else feels it's really unfair that China's got such a massive trade surplus. And what Trump's trying to do actually is to try and equalize that, right? And so from the Chinese perspective, they're going to be looking at this thinking, so ironic, right? Back then you guys were getting us addicted on opium, now look who's addicted to something else. Yeah. Just interesting how history sort of rhymes.
Yeah, no, it's a fair statement, and I have to agree with you. I mean, when you look back at the I think they call it the Opium Wars back then, with what was going on with Britain and China, it's kind of reversed, like how you said it. Trump continued on. Sadly, past administrations have allowed China to get so far ahead of fair and balanced trade that it's become a great burden to the American taxpayer. As president, I can no longer allow this to happen. In the spirit of achieving fair trade, we must balance this very unfair trading relationship. China should not have put new tariffs on $75 billion of U.S. products, politically motivated. And starting on October 1st, the $250 billion of goods and products from China currently being taxed at 25% will be taxed at 30%. Additionally, the remaining $300 billion of goods and products from China that was being taxed from September 1st at 10% will now be taxed at 15%. And he finishes the tweet, "Thank you for your attention to this matter." So, I mean, and these tweets started off, it rocked the market. Mm-hmm. The market went down, gold and silver started shooting up, and then now carry over into Asia, we're seeing gold and silver starting to continue. Mm-hmm. But overall, what was that all about?
I don't know. I really don't know. maybe something's coming down the pipe, right? And he's just wanting to distract everyone. And I really don't know. I mean, if he knows that the systemic change coming about, you know, maybe this is a good way to get everyone looking in another direction before a new system gets put in place, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
bogeyman now is China. The bogeyman now is the Federal Reserve. You know.
Yeah. It was Russia. It was people in the Middle East hiding in caves. Now
Yeah.
it's China. I think you know, when we hear people say the U.S. always has to have a boogeyman, I think we have to agree. But looking at the smarter people out there, Annika Green, our leaders and corporations sold us out. They could have given incentives to keep companies here. Not rocket science, is it? Yeah, we've had past couple decades through globalism and whatnot. U.S. has lost a lot of its manufacturing base. It has gone overseas, and it just kept going and moving over, and the U.S. really has lost its production base, and I think that's where we have to consider if all of this production came back to the U.S. In the industries tried to start up again. I don't think it would be hard for U.S. products to be competitive on a global scale, just because of the material cost, the labor cost. Would they be able to compete with, if you're in the UK, let's say, and you had two shirts, one made in the USA, one made in China, and there's going to be a price difference between the two. Which shirt are you going to buy?
Yeah, well, if markets were really allowed to work, right, freely, and if America always, in the last few decades, you know, America's been gaining a large pile of debt, right? If markets were allowed to work, the US dollar would have been weakening a lot more over the last few years.
Yeah.
And because of that, American goods would have become a lot more competitive. But because at the moment, America's got a reserve currency status behind the dollar's a lot higher than it should be, and therefore goods from America will be a lot more expensive. So I think if we were living in a more multipolar world where the dollar was allowed to float against other currencies, you would see the dollar being a lot weaker, and then you would see the American manufacturing sector or the market on a whole be a lot more competitive.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I agree. Multipolar world. Hang on to that thought. We're going to get to that in a minute. But Trump's reaction or Trump's tweets created an amazing reaction. And I was watching CNBC, and I had to pull this clip for you guys and just to get your opinion on it. So here we go. It's a short clip, about a minute or so. Oops. Hang on, guys. Let me close a few windows. We'll get to it. Wouldn't be a Monday without technical difficulties, right? So hang on. I'll get to it and see if we can get it going. Okay, tell you what, it doesn't look like it's gonna roll, so we'll go on with the question. Well, what happened was okay, so what happened was the host, she was giving her opinions on Trump's tweets, and then one of the other guys on the panel had said that but just tell me this, do you think that the US has a fair deal with China when it comes to trade? And her response was, I don't care about that right now. And that kind of, I gotta admit, it got to me a bit where, you know, she said, I don't care about that right now. And she was more concerned about what to tell investors, you know, where do investors go? And I found that a bit troublesome, a little bit disheartening, to be honest, because I think, you always have to care about your country and what's going on in your country. And she kind of played it off where, forget that, I'm more important in investing and where to put the money. And it was a bit tough to swallow. And the thing that got to me was neither or no one on the panel said, okay, the markets are shaky. Maybe it's time to look at safe havens like gold. None of them even bothered to say that, which I found a bit disheartening. But I went on, to look a bit more at things, and I came across this article because people tend to think most Americans, they're not in stocks, okay? But the truth of the matter is we really are. And so this article where they asked the question, what percentage of Americans own stocks, was answered by a politician in California, where he had said, he's the Representative Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, and he had said that most Americans don't own stocks. The distribution of stock ownership by wealth percentile, the top 10% have 84% of all the stocks in the US. The rest of us, roughly 16% total, outside of the top 10% of people in the US. And I think for the most part, that's how we look at it. But he did go on to say that or a professor from, I think it was New York U, could be wrong, but he said, even if you don't own or trade individual stocks, there's a decent chance you have a 401k account or an individual retirement account or belong to a pension fund that is invested in stocks. So now that changes everything around, because if you throw that into the mix, more than 50% of Americans have some type of exposure to the stock market. And, this is where, if you do have a 401k, as we've been talking about for quite a while, that same 401k that's gotten you your gains through the stock market is exposed to losses from the stock market. And that's why we will always talk about, if you do have a 401k and you're already buying precious metals, gold, silver, because you think a fiat event is happening, again, your 401k is exposed to that same fiat event. So, do take some time to look at rolling over some of that 401k into a precious metals IRA. I know, if you've been following me, I've been saying this before quite a bit, but do go ahead and take a look at that. So coming back to what the panel had said, when she said she doesn't care right now because she's more interested in telling investors where to put their money, then it sat well with me. But overall, I mean, what do you think is the priority here? Getting a fair trade deal or telling investors where to put their money because of uncertainty?
Yeah, and it's a dangerous game to be playing, right? To tell in such a volatile environment, to be trying to tell people where to. Yeah, I don't know. That's way above my pay grade, but
Yeah, same.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think what got everyone into this whole trade situation was, it's all about getting a fair deal, right? It's all about, let's all compete on a equal playing field. And if at this point the narrative is it's not about that, then it's pretty dangerous. So what are we running headlong into for, right?
Yeah. Okay. And then as mentioned, you didn't hear any one of these people on the panel say, okay, look, if it is uncertain times, maybe let's take a look at moving into safe haven assets. You didn't hear that. But there was one guy who did, Mark Mobius, and with a little luck, I'll play this clip and hopefully it'll work. Hey, hang on. Let me start this over. Okay, and for some reason it looks like this clip is not going to play as well Monday mornings, right? Okay, so what Mark basically was saying is that you should be buying gold at any price, any level right now. And he made the statement where you can buy ETFs with gold reserves, but they are susceptible to government takeover by physical. Government takeover, that puzzled me. I'm not quite sure what he meant by government takeover. I know you haven't seen the clip, but any idea what he would mean by government takeover?
I'm not sure if he was referring to, the what happened back, was it in the 30s when America confiscated gold
Yeah, it could be.
I mean, it's like a big honeypot, right? All that gold is in one place and it's
Yeah.
very, very visible. So if gold was to become a new bedrock of a new financial system, that's a lot of gold in one place for the government to say, hey, maybe we need this for national security reasons,
Right.
to keep things stable.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is it is one issue with I know there's depositories, Delaware. I think Texas is building a depository if it's not ready yet. I think that's one concern where if you are in the US, do you really want to put it in that depository where the government can simply say, hey, close the doors, we're gonna take what we need. It's all there for them. But
And another thing, he said to buy it at any price, right?
Buy
I think
physical, yes.
he might be on the same point as Rogers was, saying that everyone needs that little bit of insurance, right? So if you don't have insurance, get some. And Rogers often says, buying gold's just like buying fire insurance or buying car insurance. You buy it, and if you don't have to use it, it's fine. And with gold, it's pretty cool because you buy it and it actually doesn't run out. You can pass it on to your next of kin, down the track. Gold's just a good insurance against market volatility and paradigm shifts.
okay, take a look at some of the viewers' comments again. Guys, sorry about these clips not playing. Not sure why. It seems to be a bit lagging. Shane Clements, if you don't hear all sides, how can you form an effective defense? That's true. I mean, I can be just as biased as the next guy. Jason can be. We all can be just as biased as the next guy, but you do have to hear all sides or different opinions, and you have to stay open because if you stay closed, you may not hear the full story of things. And they say love is blind, hate can be even more blind. So do always try to take in all sides as much as you can. Tiger Roll, buy gold and silver at any price as fast as you can. The collapse is coming. Jason, when's the collapse coming?
Yeah, I wouldn't pretend to know, but every month when I get my salary, I try and put a little bit away in precious metals for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so Jason touched on the polar, what was that again? The global polar.
Like a multipolar world.
Right.
Yeah.
And that came from the Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, where he had made a statement at Jackson Hole, and I'll try again to play his clip and see if this can work with what Mark Carney had to say. Okay, that'll be strike three. So we're out. No, but anyway, this article from The Guardian more or less summarized what Mark Carney had to say. And The dollar is too dominant and could be replaced by a digital currency. This is the governor from a bank in the Bank of England saying this now. Stockpiling dollars has become a barrier to global trade. So we'll go through it really quick. Bank of England Governor Mark Carney has challenged the dollar's position as the world's reserve currency, arguing that it could be replaced by a global digital alternative to end a savings glut that resulted in 10 years of low inflation and ultra low interest rates. Is that a reset? Is some type of a reset coming in, new monetary currency system? We'll see. Likening the move to the end of sterling's command of international money, sterling referring to pound sterling, 100 years ago, Carney said that the dollar had reached a level of dominance that meant it was a barrier to sustainable recovery. Now, here we go. He said a new digital currency backed by a large group of nations, would unlock dollar funds that governments currently hoard as an insurance policy. Let me move on a bit here. A digital currency could dampen the domineering influence of the US dollar on global trade, Carney said in a speech at the gathering of central bankers from around the world in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. If the share of trade invoiced in a digital currency were to rise, shocks in the US would have less potent spillovers through exchange rates, and trade would become less synchronized across countries. Let me find that part where he talks about the multi. Hang on. Hang on, guys. Okay, we'll just run through it and we'll probably come across that part. Dollar's influence on global financial conditions could similarly decline if a financial architecture developed around the new digital currency and displaced the dollar's dominance in credit markets by reducing the influence of the US on the global financial cycle. This would help reduce the volatility of capital flows to emerging market economies. The Chinese currency, the renminbi, has been cited as an alternative to the dollar, along with proposed digital currencies such as Facebook's Libra. Carney said neither was in a position to take over from the dollar, but new technologies could allow for a global digital currency to challenge the US currency. Digital currencies have attracted the attention of central banks in the past years as the prospect of mobile business and consumer transaction has become more popular. And this is what Jason was talking about over in China, where you'll simply scan a QR code and your money will transact. Earlier this year, the Bank of England welcomed Facebook's Libra initiative. The Libra initiative wasn't so welcome in the US, but it was in England, and which was seen as a challenge to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Bank officials said the initiative, which was backed by several banks, could be a useful addition to trading goods and services. A succession of central banks have criticized Libra, however, saying it lacks the rules and regulations to be a reliable currency. Europe Commission opened an antitrust investigation into Libra earlier this week, saying it feared the private digital currency could unfairly disadvantage rivals to be open to abuse. What happened to be a warmer response to Libra, Carney said retail transactions are taking place increasingly online rather than on the high street and through electronic payments over cash. Basically, in a nutshell, Carney is saying the dollar is going to be challenged, and they're looking at some type of virtual currency to challenge the dollar's reserve currency status. How did you digest Carney's statements?
Yeah, the main thing that came across was it's pretty dollar negative,
Yeah.
right? He says that the next currency might be a digital one, yeah, but I don't know what that means. Is that a digital currency that's backed by, different, like something like an SDR that's digital? I don't know. All I know is the current paradigm's very dollar centric, and if we move to something new, it means it's non-dollar centric.
Yeah.
And if we were to have something that was globally accepted, it would have to be trusted by everyone, right? And that means trusted by people in the Middle East, trusted by the Russians, the Europeans, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Western sphere. So what do you think is trusted by everyone, right?
I think
Not many things are on the table.
Yeah, I think the one type of money that would be trusted is gold, and if gold or silver is not easily transportable or not that easy to move as far as transactions goes, then that's where some type of a virtual or crypto would come in, where it probably would use the blockchain to be able to transact some type of crypto that would be backed by the trusted gold or silver. What do you think on that?
I think gut feel, I think that's where things are going, because we need something that's neutral, something that's real money, right, and something that's globally accepted. So I don't know anyone that doesn't see gold. I don't know any cultures that don't view gold as something that's valuable, right?
Yeah.
So just like how everyone sees oil as energy, I think everyone sees gold as money. So a new system where it's not based on the dollar probably will have some form of gold backing in there.
Okay. Some of your comments out there, Just Us, Texas. Carney is setting it all up, all propaganda. Could be, he could very well be. I mean, the elite, they do have a tendency to let you know what they're going to do before they do it. So
That's nice of them.
it's nice of them, and it's nice that if they are going to do this, they've told us about it years ago, and we've all had time to stock up on gold and silver and other things, but they do have a tendency to let us know what they're about to do. Min Jin Xiao, how you doing? So dollar is fine with also a huge amount of debt, but RMB can't be.
I think at the moment everyone trusts the dollar more than the renminbi, right? And everyone thinks of the American system as the freest one, the fairest one. And that's why I think even with that huge amount of debt, everyone's still kind of happy to hold dollars. Whereas China doesn't enjoy, I guess for good reason, doesn't enjoy that same amount of trust that the U.S. system does.
Right. Another comment, winging it. Tracy, digital currency, anything that goes plus or minus 10 to 15% in a day is not an investment, it's gambling. And I think that's a little bit of the knock on crypto right now, is it's so volatile. And I think that's where some type of gold backing will help it to be a bit more stable.
You saw this morning that the Turkish lira dropped 15% in 1 hour. So, and Turkey's not a small, insignificant country,
Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can find another one. Let's see. I'm trying to find something there. I'm still blinking in disbelief about the old farmer. Okay, let's see. Elbow Sanchez, correct. We hear this quite a bit. The dollar is the prettiest of the ugly sisters, and as Jason said, it still is the most trusted. And I think that's maybe the last leg the dollar has, because, as we've talked about before, when you look at Russia, China, IMF, the countries in Europe, if you combine all of these countries, the gold that they have about twice as much gold as the U.S. So if they were to move and create a currency, as Governor Carney said, groups or multiple various banks or countries, it would kind of fit what he's saying, especially since they have twice the amount of gold as the U.S. and we often hear that phrase, whoever has the most gold makes the rules. So if they do combine, if they do go ahead with things like Instex, where they move away from the dollar, things could be set up.
Yeah. And with the way Trump's been behaving and the tweets that he's been sending out, it's eroding that trust, right? It's eroding that trust in the American dollar-centric system. And maybe that's by design. Maybe he does want that weaker US dollar so that the manufacturing sector in America can recover. Who knows? But it's not helping when the president of a country is telling people publicly where they should have their companies. It's
Right.
just...
Yeah. PM Ruckus, correction in gold and silver prices soon. It always will correct. I wouldn't be surprised if it did correct, but that's where you will want to buy the dip again as it corrects. So keep an eye on the prices. And one thing I wanted to share was, a lot of you may be thinking, can Trump actually do what he's saying with this IEEP, International Emergency Economic Powers Act, where Trump is, he may order companies to do this or that or come back home or whatever it is. So just to give you a brief outlook on what Trump is saying as far as this 1977 Act goes. International Emergency Economic Powers Act provides the president broad authority to regulate a variety of economic transactions, followed by a declaration of national emergency. IEEPA, like the Trading with the Enemy Act, the TWEA, from which it branched, sits at the center of the modern U.S. sanctions regime. Changes in the use of IEEPA powers since the Act's enactment in '77 have caused some to question whether the statute's oversight provisions are robust enough given the sweeping economic powers it confers upon the president upon the declaration of the strategy. Let me fast forward a bit through this. Let me get to page 22, because I think this is the important part. Now, everyone's reacting as if this is something new that President Trump is bringing this upon us. It's something new. It's never happened before. But each year since 1990, presidents have issued roughly 4.5 executive orders citing this very document, the IEEPA, which Trump is talking about, and have declared 1.5 new national emergencies citing the IEEPA. On average, though, emergencies invoking this act last nearly a decade. The longest emergency was also the first, where President Jimmy Carter, in response to the Iranian hostage crisis of '79, declared a first national emergency under the provisions of this act, and it's lasted some 40 years. Moving on. Many of the executive orders invoking the IEEPA have followed this pattern of limiting the scope to a specific territory, government, or its nationals. Executive Order 12513, for example, prohibited imports into the United States of goods and services of Nicaraguan origin and exports from the U.S. of goods destined to Nicaragua. Now here it goes a bit further, where it says the order likewise prohibited Nicaraguan air carriers and vessels of Nicaraguan registry from entering U.S. ports. Jason, do you think we're going to get to that point where airlines can't fly in anymore from certain countries and ships can't come in anymore?
I really hope not. I mean, it's not good for anyone, right, if that happens. I think why people don't really talk about this act much is because in the past it was probably used against pretty insignificant countries, Sorry, Nicaragua. But yeah, against somebody like China, then I don't know, that's a really big game changer.
Yeah, you're right about that. It was used but used in different ways before, where President George H. Bush, Papa Bush, declared the first geographically non-specific emergency in response to the threat posed by the proliferation of chemical and biological weapons. Then we had Obama declared emergencies to respond to the threats of transnational criminal organizations and persons engaging in malicious cyber-enabled activities. So again, just to calm things down a bit, this act has been used before for various reasons. It's not something new. Don't get don't get your blood pressure up over it. Is what I'm trying to say. It's happened before, but I think it's on a higher level right now. I don't think it's been used on this level. And as mentioned, if it gets to a point where planes and ships can't come in anymore, I think we're going to be headed towards a very, very different time, and you will be wanting to hold gold and silver at that point.
Yeah, I would agree. Things seem to be, it's like the dominoes are falling faster, right?
Yeah.
The news, what used to, you get a news article that used to happen, I don't know, once every 2 months. Now you get 3 of those at night, right? So
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go through a few more comments and then we'll wrap it up. Let's see. Here's a couple good ones. Alk Art, Trump is a lunatic. And then we have Winging It Tracy, Trump is a genius. So, and that seems to be where we are right now. You like the guy, you don't like the guy. We may not understand what he's doing. He's usually steps ahead of us. But it's always okay to state your view. Just if you can back it up a little bit, that would be also more helpful. But it's better than we all have the same opinion and being afraid to speak our mind. Let's see. I think maybe that's about it. You guys have been pretty good with the comments, so we appreciate that, and we appreciate Jason sharing some time with us. Thanks for stopping by, and hopefully we can get you back in. And can you ask Jim if I can go over to his house?
okay,
He didn't invite me last time.
I'll send him a text message, see what he says.
Okay, but that's it, guys. Just want to let you guys know, as always, just keep your head up, saddle up for what's coming ahead, and silver up. We'll see you guys next week. Take care of everyone. Bye-bye.